Universal Casualty, Super Q, los Miami Dolphins y tú rumbo al Super Bowl. Con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, rumbo al Super Bowl. Con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, rumbo al Super Bowl. Son los Dolphins, nuestros Miami Dolphins, el team número 1 en toda la nación. Y son ellos orgullo de Miami y de todos los latinos en la capital del sol. Con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, rumbo al Super Bowl. Con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, rumbo al Super Bowl. Este año no me hablen de los Redskins, no me hablen de los Chargers ni de los Dallas Cowboys, porque los Dolphins son número 1 y lo demostrarán al llegar al Super Bowl. Con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, rumbo al Super Bowl. Con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, rumbo al Super Bowl. Nuestra línea está mejor que nunca y nuestra defensiva fue siempre la mejor. Y es por eso que yo no tengo duda que los Miami Dolphins ganarán el Super Bowl. Con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, rumbo al Super Bowl. Con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, rumbo al Super Bowl. Con los Miami Dolphins me voy para el Super Bowl. Con los Miami Dolphins me voy para el Super Bowl. Con los Miami Dolphins me voy para el Super Bowl. Con los Miami Dolphins me voy para el Super Bowl. Universal Casualty y Super Q, los primeros. Bueno, caballeros, todo el mundo que cante con nosotros. Dame una D, dame una O, dame una L, dame una P, una H, una I, una N, una S, que es lo que tenemos. Miami Dolphins. Me voy para el Super Bowl. 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 Me voy para el Super Bowl.
You're listening to the DolphinsTalk.com podcast network.
There's a team that's in our heart. We're rooting for the Dolphins. Our mighty, mighty Dolphins. We're rooting for the Dolphins. Our mighty, mighty Dolphins.
Hello, Miami Dolphin fans, and welcome to the Same Old Dolphin Show, sponsored by BetUS, part of the DolphinsTalk.com podcast network. I'm Josh Katzker. With me today and every day is my brother from the exact same mother, Aaron the Brain. Aaron, say hello to the people.
Hello to the people.
Say happy Halloween to the people.
Happy Halloween to the people.
I'm here. I'm in the spirit, as those watching live on the DolphinsTalk.com YouTube channel and the I'm a Miami Dolphins fan Facebook page can see. I am in my penguin costume with my Jalen Waddle jersey on, and just like the man himself, I'm going to waddle with it. Because Jalen Waddle had himself a day. Tua Tagovailoa had himself a day. Tyreek Hill had himself a day. And the Miami Dolphins got themselves a big 31-27 road victory over the Detroit Lions, Brain. And while it wasn't all pretty all the time in all aspects, the offense was absolutely clicking on Sunday. And the Miami Dolphins, if they can pair that kind of offensive output, Brain, with the kind of defense that we saw them play for stretches of the 2021 season, and quite frankly, in spurts so far in this 2022 season, and if they can put it together for 60 minutes, look out. Yeah,
well, I mean, quite the if, but
I mean, well, there's the rub.
Yeah, quite the if, but you've got to feel good. Look, Tua obviously misses the time that he misses. He comes back. The offense looks sharp, scripted against Pittsburgh, and then, looks very rusty the rest of the way. And so you had to start asking yourself, well, is the offense going to get back into rhythm? And if they are, this should be the week that they do it, being that the Lions are just horrendous defensively. And they didn't disappoint. The Dolphins offense absolutely came through. It was as I said they needed to be on the preview show. They needed to have their best offensive output of the season. And granted, from a points perspective, this was not the Baltimore game, but from a start to finish perspective, this was the most complete game by the Dolphins offense all season. And this was the most complete game by Tua Tagovailoa of his entire career thus far. This was really a master class. He was damn near perfect in this game. There was not a single mistake that I would look at and say, yeah, that was a really bad, decision. He was, he rolled out when he needed to roll out. He showed pocket presence in the pocket. He took sacks and protected his body and didn't try to do too much when the play was dead. And then when the throw needed to be made, for the most part, the throw was on the money. And there were some wow throws. His accuracy and his quick release, which are his two special traits, were absolutely on display. And I mean, to have Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill, who broke the record for most receiving yards by a pair of teammates through 8 games in the season, that's held by Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill. And Tyreek Hill is on pace to go over 2,000 yards receiving right now. That dude is just on a whole other level. And it's fun to watch because it really, since Duper and Clayton, the Dolphins haven't had this kind of passing attack anywhere close to this kind of passing attack. And this might be better than Duper and Clayton. And that's not to say that Tua's Dan Marino, but right now, this offense is as explosive on offense as we have seen since peak Marino.
Well, not to say that Tua is Dan Marino, but I can tell you that he did something on Sunday that Dan Marino has never done. He threw for over 350 yards and 3 touchdowns while completing over 80% of his passes, 29 of 36. Dan Marino, easily the greatest quarterback the Miami Dolphins have ever had, arguably the greatest quarterback in NFL history. Dan Marino never did what Tua did on Sunday. So, we'll just take that for what it's worth. The easy response is to say, well, the Dan Marino never had to play against those Detroit Lions, but be that what it may. Tua Tagovailoa
play a lot of bad Jets teams, though.
Yeah, he did. He played a lot of awful Jets teams and on a lot of awful Patriots teams.
That's true.
For that matter. So listen, there's nothing to take away from Tua Tagovailoa here. The guy did it. The guy did his job, and it was fantastic. It was everything that you wanted and more from Tua Tagovailoa and this offense. They absolutely answered the bell. They heard all the conversation about, oh, well, this Dolphins team isn't scoring enough. They need more points. And, well, they certainly answered that with 31 points. Just an absolutely dynamite performance. And not to sit here and do the humble brag about my fantasy team, but all I'm going to say is that the Tua Tagovailoa, Jalen Waddle stack worked really well for me this week. And my opponent had Tyreek Hill, and it ended up not mattering. So, hey, happy man. But listen, this was a great performance on offense by the Dolphins, and we could sit here and rave about it all day long, and we will. I mean, you mentioned Tua had some incredible passes. The second touchdown to Jalen Waddle in particular, I thought was glorious. The fade to the corner. Waddle could have run all day on that one. I actually think probably his best touchdown pass was the one to Gesicki. I think that was probably his best play, one of the best plays of the game. He also showed a couple of heaters. He also threw a couple of fastballs in there, threw one to Trent Sherfield. I mean, for all the criticism that Tua has had, and yeah, you can say that maybe there were a couple of underthrown balls, but I mean, when Tyreek Hill is one of your receivers, I think everybody's going to throw some underthrown balls.
I mean, you give the point is you give your receiver a chance to make a play. And some people are saying that throw, the one in the middle of the field, not the one that was kind of towards the sidelines earlier in the game, but the one towards the middle of the field really looked like it was more of like a comeback route. And, Tua threw it where it needed to be. And Tyreek Hill does not play like a 5'9" wide receiver. But that didn't look like an underthrown ball. That looked like Tua throwing the ball where his receiver can make a play on it, and Tyreek Hill didn't disappoint. And as long as it's Tyreek Hill out there, like give him a shot, man. Like, yeah, absolutely. I'm not gonna argue with that. I thought Tua had a phenomenal game.
He did. He was awesome. He was awesome in this game. There's no two ways around it. He was unbelievable. Just like it was, like I said, I put out a tweet earlier in the week that is a true story, by the way, that when I was at the dentist last week, my dentist literally said to me that he puts Tua, my dentist is a Jets fan, he puts Tua in the same tier as Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes. And while I'm certainly not ready to jump on that yet, if Tua puts up a bunch more performances like this, maybe you got to start to have that conversation a little bit.
Easy.
I said a bunch more performances like this.
Okay. All right.
Take it easy.
Yeah. You take it easy.
I'm not saying he's there yet, but I'm saying if I can get a bunch more performances like this, I'm going to be really pleased. And I think if he can continue to put up performances like that, and the big question with Tua, the only other question that is out there about Tua at this point that I think he has not answered, well, one is whether he can do it like this in December outdoors. And we're going to find out because he may be doing this in some weather in Chicago next week. So that's one question. And the other question is whether he can stay out there for a whole season.
Look, I think both of those points are valid. I also think consistency. Like this is, the question isn't now, does Tua have the ceiling? But Tua now at this point has shown, give him the weapons, give him a real offense, and the ceiling is as high as any quarterback. The question is the consistency, because we've also seen some very poor throws at times and poor decisions made by Tua. This was a game where you didn't have those poor decisions, and that's ultimately where his success is going to lie. Is not in the number of times he can drive the Dolphins down to score, but how many times does he make the drive killing, game killing turnover or the really bad mistake? And so that's the question. But at this point, he's gotten to a certain level where, as far as being a franchise quarterback, the only question is whether or not he can stay healthy. Because he certainly, at this point, has shown that he's the caliber of quarterback that you can absolutely win with and you can absolutely build around. So I think he's definitely a franchise quarterback from a talent perspective. The question is, can he stay out there? Can he do it for a full season?
And those are the questions that we will get answers to as the season continues on. But right now, he's answering all of the questions in the affirmative, and you're feeling good about that. Let's talk about some other aspects of this game. We've talked about the good. They ran the ball. They did well. And I think in the second half of this game in particular, the Dolphins just completely controlled the game. For as much of the first half, as much as a lot of the first half of this game was sloppy and undisciplined, that continued on a little bit in the second half as well. But what was beautiful about the second half was that it was probably the best half of complimentary football the Dolphins have played all season, because the Dolphins just took control of the game, held on to the ball on offense, and really just locked it down defensively. They really said, no, Lions, you are not going to get back into this game. And they just completely controlled time of possession and said, that's it. This is our game now. And that in and of itself was beautiful as well. But we got to talk about the aspects of this game that were troubling. And that was that this defense looked all out of sorts in the first half as they were trying to figure out how to get to Jared Goff. Now, part of that is the Lions do have a strong offensive line, which is a really good thing for them. It's probably one of the strongest aspects of their team. But, aside from that, it took the Dolphins a while to make the necessary adjustments defensively to take some things away from Jared Goff, because he was able to pretty much have whatever he wanted when it came to finding receivers, and the Dolphins were giving a lot of room until the second half, and things, turned around. So, Brain, what were your thoughts overall about the defensive performance? Because as bad as it was early, they completely turned it around in the second half, and for the second straight game, gave up 0 second half points.
Well, I think the defense deserves credit for making adjustments and playing better, but I also think that a big part of the defensive success was the offense's ability to control the ball, because Detroit, I think, what did they have? 3 possessions?
I think it was 3 possessions.
Yeah. So Detroit's first possession, they basically killed themselves with penalties. They put themselves in like a 1st and 30 and were, inside their own 15. So they basically had self-inflicted wounds, and the Dolphins just took care of business and didn't allow them to get 30 yards in 3 plays, which, granted, the way they played in the first half was still a major accomplishment. And then I think it was the Lions' second drive was the drive where they kind of had some things going, and they decided to go for it on a 4th and 1. And, the Dolphins defense came up with a stop, and that was impressive. I mean, the Dolphins did what they needed to do defensively. But holding the Lions to just 3 possessions goes a long way towards holding them to 52 yards and 0 points in the second half. So I think, to your point, complimentary football, that was the best half of football that the Dolphins have played all season long. Granted, they only scored 14 points, but obviously we were in scoring position there at the end of the game. If we wanted to score, we could have scored again. But just I think it's a good showing. It shows again the resiliency of the team and of this defense, but I'm not getting too high on it, because even though the Lions are a team that has shown some explosiveness this season and has shown the ability to put up a lot of yards and a lot of points, and they did that in the first half, they are still the Lions, and they are still a team that hasn't figured out how to win games and how to do it on a consistent basis on the offensive side of the ball. They kind of do it where they put up a bunch of yards, they put up some points, but then when they really need to, they come up short. And so there was a very much a vintage Lions performance. So I don't know how much of that is really great Dolphins defense. Look, they did what they needed to do in the second half, but I don't think we should be resting on our laurels right now, because I think there are significant problems. And I think the penalties, particularly the pre-snap penalties, absolutely need to be addressed and need to be cleaned up. I will say this. I noticed in this game, I think there were 4 or 5 lined up in the neutral zone penalties called for either side. So this kind of felt like a league office point of emphasis, where you could probably call this in any game where there's probably defensive linemen that are lined up in the neutral zone. And maybe this is something that somebody brought to their attention, particularly with like Christian Wilkins, because it seemed like he was the focus there. Regardless, you've got to clean it up, because if that's going to be the focus and that's going to be a point of emphasis, well, you got to be on top of that. I'll also say this. The Lions offensive line, obviously very good. You've got to find a way to put pressure on the opposing quarterback. And Jalen Phillips had some pressures and got to Jared Goff, didn't get home on a sack, but, had some pressures, made some impact plays. But who hasn't really been making any impact plays? That's Emmanuel Ogbah. And Emmanuel Ogbah, if this Dolphins defense is going to be where they need to be, Emmanuel Ogbah is going to need to play a lot better, because he kind of fits a role that we don't really, I guess you could put Melvin Ingram there in that role and you could play him opposite, but Emmanuel Ogbah, the ability to be hand in the dirt, pass rusher and edge defender, setting the edge on the ground game is a, kind of a unique skill set that the Dolphins don't really have another guy that can do that.
Well, and that is going to lead to a point of conversation that we're going to have here in a couple of minutes about somebody that the Dolphins may be bringing in to replace or supplement Emmanuel Ogbah. And we'll talk about that in a little bit, because the rumor mill has been going on this Monday. But the penalties were certainly concerning, and we know that the Dolphins' lack of pressure seems to be related to the fact that they're not blitzing as much as they have in the past. And that obviously relates to the fact that Byron Jones is not out there at corner, but the Dolphins seem to be doing just fine. I mean, it's not great. They're not great at corner, because obviously it's quite a step back when you don't have Byron Jones out there. But I thought Kader Kohu and Keon Crossan played decent games in and of themselves. I thought the move to have Eric Rowe as a healthy scratch was an interesting one, Brain. What was your thought on that?
That made no sense. It made no sense. And then it promptly came back to bite them when you had TJ Hawkinson breaking off, 80 yards receiving. Granted, a lot of that was on one big play, and frankly, Javon Holland got beat pretty bad on that. But Eric Rowe, the one thing that he does well, he's not bad. He does more than one thing well, but the one thing that he really, really does well is he covers tight ends. So, it's a head scratcher to me. I get it, because what you're doing is you're putting in Verone McKinley and you're saying, well, he can play in the single high safety, and it frees up Javon Holland to do more things in the box and do more of the shallow zone stuff and really be more of an impact player around the field. But we saw that be the game plan, and it was a really rough first half for Javon Holland. And I know he played a lot better in the second half, and he had a ton of responsibility on him. And I'm not going to sit here and bash Javon Holland because he's one of the best players on the defensive side of the ball. Frankly, he's one of the best players on the team. And he's, I think at this point in his career, arguably one of the best safeties in the National Football League.
Agreed.
But I think you're thin at safety without Byron Jones. So having Eric Rowe not even dress does not make sense.
Not Byron Jones, Brandon Jones.
Brandon Jones.
Right.
Yeah.
It was a real head scratcher of a move, and obviously maybe that all played a part in why it took the Dolphins, taking a little bit longer to figure out what they were doing defensively and really start to lock things in. But regardless, they eventually did get there, and they did what they needed to do, and they got the win. We knew that Detroit was going to be coming in hot based off of the fact that they had a couple of down games. They got DeAndre Swift back, although we saw a lot more Jamal Williams in this game than I think I was expecting to see. But it was clear that the Lions also benefited from having Amon-Ra St. Brown back in the lineup. And this is still not a full Browns. The Lions, it was a good effort by the Lions in the first half, but eventually we saw their shortcomings, and they eventually started to self-destruct a little bit as well. And be that all things being equal, the Lions fired their defensive backs coach on Monday after getting torched by Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, which I think is a little unfair, but I'm sure it wasn't a reaction to one game either, because the Lions have been sort of getting torched by everybody this season. But regardless of who you're playing, the Dolphins still had to go out there and get the job done. And that's exactly what they did to get the 31-27 victory. Other positives in this game, like Thomas Morstead in his one punt did a great job. Jason Sanders went out there and hit a couple field goals. So that was good. And listen, the Dolphins got the win. They improved to 5-3 and are sitting pretty, I think, in that, I guess you'd call it the second tier of AFC teams at the moment behind Kansas City and Buffalo. I think they're solidly in that second tier of AFC football teams right now. And as long as they can continue in this chunk of the schedule, beating the teams that they're supposed to beat, you're going to give yourself a shot, right? The Dolphins were 5-3 in the first half of the season, in the first 8 games. If they can go 5-3 in the next 8 games, they'll be sitting there at 10-6 with 1 game left. And that 1 game is going to be, it could very well be the difference between whether or not this team makes the playoffs, because I think 11-6, you're certainly in. 10-7, maybe not. So we'll see what happens, but the Dolphins are sitting pretty in a good spot right now. Now, of course, as I mentioned earlier, there's some other things that we need to talk about today involving some rumors that are going on, and we're going to do that. But first, a reminder, if you haven't done so already, and boy, we've made it a while into the show before we're getting this plug in, but make sure you're following us. I'm at Amplified to Rock. He is at Aaron the Brain. Follow us on Twitter. The show is at Same Old Dolphins. We invite you to download, rate, review, and subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, SoundCloud, anywhere that you get your podcast. Make sure that you subscribe to the Dolphins Talk YouTube channel. Turn on notifications so you know every time we go live or add new content. And then make sure you're visiting DolphinsTalk.com each and every day. It is your one-stop shop for all things Miami Dolphins. And of course, I've also got Oh no, it's a bloodbath in here. There's got to be a better way to get my dagger clean and shiny, safer than this. This is what I used to deal with when I cut myself shaving before I knew about Manscaped. Thank you, Manscaped, for keeping my dagger slick and ready for wherever the night takes me. Manscaped is trusted by over 6 million men worldwide. Join the movement by going to manscaped.com. And for 20% off and free shipping, you can use the promo code Dolphins Talk. Listen, it's time to end the days of shaving your balls ending up looking like a horror movie. The folks at Manscaped have the perfect package for your package to get this done. The Below the Waist grooming leaders have a 4th generation performance package. Inside, you'll find the Lawnmower 4.0 trimmer, Weed Whacker ear and nose hair trimmer, liquid formulations, and 2 free gifts, the Shed travel bag and the premium boxer briefs. They're fantastic. So Get 20% off and free shipping with the promo code DolphinsTalk at manscaped.com. Spend spooky season using the best tools for the job at Manscaped. Again, get 20% off and free shipping with the promo code DolphinsTalk at manscaped.com. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com using the promo code DolphinsTalk. Slay your worst pubes and keep your dagger clean with Manscaped. Nothing like a Halloween Manscaped read for you there, Brain. All right, let's get into this trade deadline talk. The trade deadline is 4 p.m. on Tuesday, I believe, Brain, for the NFL. And the rumors were flying on Monday that the Dolphins and supposedly the Jets were both in conversation with the Denver Broncos about acquiring Bradley Chubb. Now, Bradley Chubb, I think, would be an upgrade over Emmanuel Ogbah when it comes to being that guy who could get home on the quarterback. And obviously the Dolphins need that help. Thing about Bradley Chubb is he's in the last year of his contract. And so, I mean, making a move for him would basically mean committing to paying him going forward, I would think. And especially, I guess that's really dependent on what you end up having to give up for him. Adam Schefter reported apparently this evening that the Broncos were offered a first-round pick, but I find that very hard to believe. I find it very hard to believe that Denver was offered a first-round pick for Bradley Chubb and said no. So that sounds to me like Denver is trying to do some haggling and try to get the price up a little bit, especially after the Bears traded Roquan Smith earlier today, traded him to Baltimore for a second and a fifth in 2023. So it seems unlikely to me that a first round pick would be on the table for Bradley Chubb, just in my personal opinion. But here we do have a question on YouTube from JC Kong NJ, and he says, do we give up our first for Chubb and see if we can get Judy repped in 2 for another future pick, or dare I say player? Hello, Mike G. Need more pass rush now, and Judy is a long-term piece. What do you think about that, Brain?
No to every single part of that question. It's just a no to every single part of it. One, I'm not giving up a first round pick for a player that is in a contract year. So basically you're committing, you're either saying we're got a rental on him for 9 games and then he walks. So you're basically saying he's the missing piece for you winning a Super Bowl. I don't think that's the case. I'm not saying that there isn't a world where that could happen, but I don't think this is the time to sell out when this team has obvious needs and obvious flaws. You don't give up a first round pick for that. And also, if you do that, you're probably giving up Christian Wilkins, because that's a big decision that needs to be made, is the extension for Christian Wilkins. So do you trade up? Are you giving up a first round pick and Christian Wilkins, essentially, not all to Denver, but essentially, are you giving up a first round pick and Christian Wilkins for Bradley Chubb? No, all day. And as for Jerry Jeudy, decent player. And obviously, I love the whole idea of continuing to build this Alabama offense, but this offense is built to play 2 receivers. It's built to have a tight end and a fullback. That is why Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill, aside from them being great players, are eating up all of the targets, because they're on the field playing every snap. So giving up any sort of piece for Jerry Jeudy just to come in and be a bit player, look, we signed Cedric Wilson to all that money this offseason. What's he doing? Nothing, because he can't block, and he's essentially just a backup to those 2 outside receivers. And if those 2 receivers are on the field, the guys that are getting played in their, in the slot as the number 3 receiver are Braylon Sanders, River Craycraft, and Trent Sherfield. So no, I'm not trading anything of value for Jerry Jeudy, and I don't think that he's a long-term piece. I do think we should be shopping Mike Gesicki, but at this point, unless you're getting something of value, like I don't know that I'm trading Mike Gesicki for a 5th round pick right now. I think there's too much value in this season to trade Mike Gesicki for a 5th round pick, even if you know that Mike Gesicki is not going to be back. Now, if I can get a day 2 pick for Mike Gesicki, or if I can get a 4th round pick for Mike Gesicki and I have another trade lined up where that 4th round pick, because the Dolphins don't have a 4th round pick this year, if that 4th round pick can turn into a player that helps Miami in the secondary or on the offensive line, then I'm listening, because that makes us better this year. But at this point, I don't know that I can really make much of the argument for trading Mike Gesicki for a 5th round pick is that it's the best that you can get, and you're going to get, otherwise you're going to lose him for nothing. And I would say the value of the team potentially making a playoff run and being at their best this season is worth losing an extra 5th round pick that you would otherwise get from trading Mike Gesicki. So if you can get a player for Mike Gesicki, I'm down. I definitely think that, we could use a pass rusher, but you got to pay a premium to trade or sign a pass rusher. That's something that's got to be addressed in the draft. You've got what you've got there, and you just have to deal with it. But you can get a guy to play to upgrade the secondary. You can potentially get a guy to upgrade this offensive line, although that may be a little bit more difficult. But the whole the Bradley Chubb thing, if we traded a 1st round pick for Bradley Chubb, would be quintessential same old Dolphins, thinking that they're closer than they really are and putting themselves in a bad situation.
Yeah, the one move that I'd be really curious about is that William Jackson one. That's the guy. That's the guy. I mean, especially as it became clearer that Byron Jones is not really close to coming back. That's the guy that the Dolphins could really benefit from bringing in. But one of the things we know about Josh Boyer is that he likes the underdog at cornerback. And I mean, he's certainly got himself a whole room full of underdogs back there in that cornerback room. So I don't know. My gut tells me that the Dolphins stand pat and actually don't end up making a move at all, and that the trade deadline comes and goes and we don't get anything. I've heard people talking about Kareem Hunt, and I've heard people talking about Alvin Kamara. And it's like, I don't think that that's a move that's going to happen, because I just think that the Dolphins have, yes, I know the Dolphins can get rid of Chase Edmonds after this season, and that that second year of money is not guaranteed, and that they would just, they've done away with the $6 million and that's the end of it. But I just don't think that that's something that's going to happen. I don't think the Dolphins are realistically one of the teams that are in there for Kareem Hunt, because I frankly don't believe that running back is one of the places where the Dolphins need to invest capital right now.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I mean, like, I can see the concerns that, the Dolphins don't have a lot of depth at running back, and that you can see how clearly, how much worse the Dolphins are when they're operating the offense and anybody other than Raheem Mostert is in there at running back. Like, we see that there is a significant drop off from Mostert to Chase Edmonds. And, I mean, we saw Savon Ahmed for one snap in this game, and we've seen a little bit of Myles Gaskin, but not really that much. But there is a significant drop off from then. But I just don't know that the Dolphins are going to be in a place to be wanting to part with any kind of significant draft capital for, what would essentially be a backup running back in Kareem Hunt. And, and for Alvin Kamara, forget it. No chance.
Well, what's the price tag for Kareem Hunt? Because Kareem Hunt is on a contract year and is a rental. And I don't think anybody is giving up nobody's giving up a 1st rounder for Kareem Hunt. And I think a late day 2 pick might be the ceiling for what the Browns can get for him. So the Dolphins, again, without a 4th round pick. So let me ask you a question. Would you trade a 3rd round pick? The Dolphins have a couple of them. Would you trade one of them for Kareem Hunt?
Would I?
Yes.
No.
Okay. Let me ask you another question. Let's say, would you trade Mike Gesicki for Kareem Hunt?
I think I probably God, for that one, I'm tempted to say yes to that. If only because that would be the Dolphins getting something of value for Mike Gesicki that, could be used immediately to potentially help them this year. But my thought is
it's all this year, because if you hang on to Mike Gesicki, you're only hanging on to him.
Right. That's
for
what I'm
this
saying.
year.
That's what I'm saying. But like you either let Mike Gesicki go for nothing or you get Kareem Hunt in return, right? And then you make a decision whether you want to pay Kareem Hunt to come back and play for you again next year. But I think that ultimately, in the way things are working right now, I think having Mike Gesicki as that additional receiving option has proven to be something of value, even though Gesicki isn't necessarily the system tight end for this particular system. I think having him as that additional receiving option adds more value to the offense right now than Kareem Hunt would as somebody to give Mostert a blow.
Mike Gesicki has 30 targets in 8 games. That means he's been targeted less than 4 times a game.
Okay.
I think Kareem Hunt would bring more value to the offense. And if, God forbid, Raheem Mostert gets hurt, and he's got a track record of being hurt, he plays the position that gets hurt the most of all the skill positions. And you've talked about your lack of depth there. I would rather have Kareem Hunt. Now, does that mean that the Browns are going to take Mike Gesicki for Kareem Hunt? No. The Browns would never make that move. But my point is, if you can get a 4th round pick for Mike Gesicki, maybe the Browns take that 4th round pick for Kareem Hunt. And I would do that all day. But I'm not going to trade anything of value for Kareem Hunt, but a day 3 pick or a player, essentially a player that you've got for 8 more or 9 more games in the regular season, who has 30 targets, which comes out to 30 divided by 8. That's 3.75 targets a game. He's got 21 catches in 8 games. So that's a little more than 2.5 catches a game. He's got some touchdowns. So yeah, he's a threat in the red zone, but I'm not sold that there aren't other guys that can be threats in the red zone. And I think if you bring in more depth and another guy like a Kareem Hunt, who can do things both out of the backfield as a runner and as a receiver, and brings more dimensions to this offense, I think there are other guys at tight end who could certainly block better than Gesicki and can do some things. Maybe aren't going to go up, aren't going to be that huge 6'6" target, but maybe that means you see a little bit more Cedric Wilson, who we paid all this money for. Maybe it means more relying on Trent Sherfield. Maybe we see a little bit more of Hunter Long getting into the groove of things and getting some more snaps, and Durham Smythe, if he's healthy, and we see this offense more take the shape of what it's supposed to be, instead of putting a square peg into a round hole, which is what we're doing with Mike Gesicki.
Yeah, I don't know. Like I said, my gut still tells me the Dolphins end up not making a move at all, and that we stand pat and we get to the deadline and nothing has changed, and we go in as it stands. And that's kind of how I felt all along, and I still kind of feel that way, especially as it's getting pretty late on right now for the Dolphins to suddenly announce that they've made a bunch of moves in rapid succession. But you never know. You never know. It's possible that as soon as this Monday night game between the Browns and the Bengals wraps up, that we hear that there's been some wheeling and dealing. But I don't know. I'm not holding my breath. I'm prepared for the Dolphins to go in as it was. I mean, I think once we got a couple of weeks beyond hearing that Byron Jones was not going to be coming back imminently and that the Dolphins hadn't made any kind of move for William Jackson. At that point, I was just like, nothing's happening. We're not making a move. Chris Grier is going to be conservative during in season, and that he's going to save what little picks he has to do some wheeling and dealing once we get to the off season, because that's typically when he likes to make his moves. So I don't know. That's kind of how I feel about all of that, Brain. My voice is starting to go, Brain, because, as some people will know, I've been sick for the past few days, was not able to do the preview show with you last week for the Lions game, and I still didn't have much of a voice yesterday, but some things are coming back to me now, so it's, getting a little bit better, but I think we kind of need to put a wrap on it here. But what do you say, Brain? Think we ought to do a pulse check real quick before we get out of here?
I think it's a good time for a pulse check.
All right, let's check it out.
Let me check your pulse if you're not fired up.
That's right. It is once again pulse check time, where you tell us how you are feeling about the Miami Dolphins in one word. Tell us how you are feeling about the Miami Dolphins right now in one word. So if you're watching us live on the Dolphins Talk YouTube channel or the I Am a Miami Dolphin Fan Facebook page, go ahead and put it in the comments right now. Let us know how you're feeling about this team in one word. Brain, why don't you get us started?
I don't know if this necessarily qualifies as one word, but I'm going to go for it anyway. And if you throw a flag, well, then we're just as undisciplined as the Dolphins. I'm going with on track. The Dolphins are on track right now. They're where they're supposed to be. They didn't necessarily get here the way that they were supposed to, but everything is okay right now. They're 5-3. They're right in the thick of things in the playoff race. If the season ended today, they'd be a playoff team. They're right there in that second tier of teams that have 2 or 3 losses. And there's a couple of teams behind them that have 4 losses that I think will be, in the mix as well. And you've got still this part of the schedule where, look, next week you're playing a Bears team, and none of these games are going to be cakewalks, but the Dolphins should take care of business. If they're a playoff team, they're going to win really these next 3 games, but at least 2 of the next 3 to put themselves in a position to, be playing for a playoff berth at the end of the season. And that's the way when the schedule came out and you built a plan, a blueprint for how you make the playoffs. At the end of the day, it was, can you get to 7-4 or 8-3 going into the last 6 games of the season where things start to get really tough? Can you rack up a bunch of wins in the middle of the season? Can you be 500 through the first month and a half? And then can you rack up a bunch of wins in the middle of the season in that soft underbelly of the schedule? Well, they got to 3-3. It wasn't how we wanted them to get to 3-3, but they got there. And now with Tua back, the offense getting healthy, we're seeing things come to fruition. And not just from a record standpoint, but we're also seeing the incremental improvements, because there was a fear coming into the season. You're learning a whole new offense. Mike McDaniel, a rookie head coach. You've got all these new pieces. Are they going to gel? Is there going to be a learning curve? And I think there's been a learning curve, but it's been it hasn't been this steady, one-to-one progress. It's been kind of up and down, where you've seen the offense in flashes look the way it's designed to look, and then at times really look stagnant and look like the Dolphins' offenses of old. But you're seeing the rhythm. You're seeing the running game, which I think is probably the biggest thing that we didn't talk about in today's show, that is actually a really important, huge development, is that the running game has consistently over the last 3 games become something that the Dolphins can rely on a little bit. And in this one, the Dolphins took a lead and they ran out the clock. because they were able to run the football. And granted, they also hit a nice, play to Tyreek Hill on the wheel route. But they also ran the ball when they needed to run the ball, when the Lions knew they were going to run the ball. And we said a few weeks ago, the test for this running game, and I don't know that the test is going to be against the Detroit Lions, but in general, the test of a running game is when you need to run the football, can you run the football? When the Dolphins needed to run the football yesterday, they ran the football and did it successfully. And they've been doing it successfully really the last 3 weeks, as long as it's been Raheem Mostert carrying the football.
Yeah. So I think on track is fair. I think that's a good one. Brain, we've got some other answers from our listeners and folks on Twitter. Josh Ritter says ecstatic. JC Kong NJ says confident. Golski is enthusiastic. Walter Whitaker is excited. Douglas Potter just says, yay! John Gerard says ecstatic. And John Santos says nervous, which I think all of those are fair. Over on the Twitter machine, let's see what we got. Doug's GT500 says cautious. Finally spiced mead at Kane Chattanooga says euphoric. Fins up 86 says amped. Phil Piccolo says thrilled. Nina Smith is hopeful. Daniel is skeptical. Okay. Dolphins Nation is ecstatic. Fish Tears, spelt like the band Fish, excited. Mike McGregor, optimistic. Ron Stoppable NJ is pumped. Tua's got a hill to waddle on, is optimistic. And T. Hutch is fired up, is how they said it. So I'm into that. And then, of course, we also got a comment from somebody on Facebook. And this is Juan Devia, who says they feel comfortable. And I find that to be very interesting because that is also my word. I'm also feeling comfortable. That performance that the Dolphins put in against the Lions is probably going to be enough to get them wins against the Bears and the Texans coming up. So right now, I feel comfortable. I'm not necessarily thrilled over the moon, although I am happy that the Dolphins are 5-3 and that they won a couple of games on the bounce, and they seem to be showing signs of righting the ship, especially with Tua in at quarterback. I feel like that's really good, but I feel comfortable with where this team is right now. The thing is about the Dolphins, we talked about how it was concerning that they had not played. They still have not played yet this season, 60 minutes of complimentary football. And with all of that being the case, they're still sitting here with a 5-3 record, right? And that's knowing that they also played a couple of games with 2.5 games without their starting quarterback. So to be sitting where they are at 5-3 right now, I'm comfortable. That doesn't mean that I'm going to be comfortable at this time next week, but for right now, I am comfortable. We'll see where I am 7 days from now. So, Brain, I think that's just going to wrap us up here. We'll be back later this week to preview the Dolphins game against the Chicago Bears. And as Juan Santos points out, the Roquan Smithless Chicago Bears. I am certainly not mad to see the Bears trade away Roquan Smith right before the Dolphins come to town. I'm certainly not upset about that. But we'll be back later this week to preview that game. Whether or not the Dolphins have any new additions, we'll cover that when we do our next show. Obviously, if anything huge happens, if any news breaks, make sure you are following us on Twitter at Amplified to Rock, at Aaron the Brain, at Same Old Dolphins, and of course at Dolphins Talk. We'll have you covered with any news that breaks regarding the Dolphins as it happens. We may even have some breaking news audio. We'll see how things go. But we'll certainly be back later this week to talk about it regardless. And it's going to be great because, it's an exciting time. It's an exciting time to be a fan of the Miami Dolphins. That much is for sure. Everything might not be perfect, but things are trending overall in the right direction. And that is a really good thing. So thank you as always for watching the Same Old Dolphin Show. If you haven't yet, go ahead and smash the like button on this video. We appreciate that. Smash subscribe on the Dolphins Talk YouTube channel. And we will be back later this week. And hopefully my voice will be fully back by that point as well. At least that's my hope. I've got to say, I'm very impressed with the fact that I have not hacked up a lung on the show. So I'm going to certainly do that probably immediately after we go off the air. Brain, any parting words for the people?
I just want to I've heard you said it, and I've heard a few people say it about the Dolphins haven't played a complete game of football yet.
It's true.
And it's true. And I just want to remind people that very few teams have played a complete game of football right now. It is very difficult to play a 60-minute game of really good offense and really good defense and really good complementary football. The teams that do that with any kind of consistency are the absolute best football teams. And even they don't do it very, very often. Even teams like the Bills and the Chiefs are going to lose games and are going to play down to their competition at times. And you've seen that this season already.
Can I interject real quick?
Yeah.
Have the Bills lost a game this season?
They have lost a game this season.
Who did they lose to?
They lost to the Miami Dolphins. But did the Dolphins play a complete game to beat the Buffalo Bills?
No. But did the Dolphins win that game?
Well, yeah, that's kind of my point.
Okay, continue. Just go ahead. I just wanted to make sure that everybody remembered that the Dolphins beat the Bills this season.
Okay, fair enough.
I just had I was sitting here in my costume. I had 300 plus trick-or-treaters coming to my house. And some of the parents were sitting there in their Bills gear, and you don't think I didn't see those looks.
Oh, did you get buffalo winged?
No, but I saw the looks of the people.
Is that
especially
what they
the
do
one
up there
kid, the one little kid trick or treater saw me wearing my 17 jersey, and he goes up and goes, "That's Allen. That's Allen." And then the big brother goes, "No, that's the Dolphins." That's right. I was like, "Yeah, that's right. This is better than Allen."
I thought he was going to say, "No, that's Tannehill."
No, that would have been really impressive, actually.
Yeah, but my point
mainly
is
just because
let's
of the
not
fact that
get hung up on the Dolphins haven't played a complete game of football yet. Yes, is that something to aspire to? Yes. Do we have 9 more weeks in the season to get to that point? Yeah, we do. And you want to see, and the Dolphins probably don't need to play a complete game of football to win the next 3 games. But at some point, to win the big games down the stretch, when you're playing San Francisco and Buffalo and you're playing the Chargers and you've got a road game in Foxborough in the cold of winter, and you're playing the Packers on Christmas Day, like in those games, that's where I want to see the Dolphins playing their best football. The Dolphins are definitely trending in the right direction. Just keep racking up wins, keep getting better, and please get healthier.
Yeah, that's one thing that we absolutely need the Dolphins to do is get healthier. Something that I need to do as well. So we're going to end the show right there. Thank you, as always, for listening. And as always, take care of yourselves and each other. And we will talk to you again next time. Bye-bye, everybody. Go Dolphins!
Tyreek Hill for MVP?